So I woke up this morning with probably 10 mentions on Twitter of people telling me, MatPat uploaded a Persona theory that involves Teddy. And as many of you may know, I of course have my old April Fool's video, Fifth Theory, Teddy is Lucifer. Meant to be a parody. And so I got a bunch of people telling me, like, jokingly, MatPat copied you, and also the video is just bad and wrong. So to get something out of the way, no, I do not think MatPat copied my video. That's nonsense and ridiculous. And I'm not mad about him making a theory that also involves Teddy. That's very silly. Now, what I do have a problem with is wrong information and being, like, weirdly antagonistic towards people. I don't like either of that, and this video has both of them for some reason. And I just don't want to hear this fucking constant stream of, did you know that Teddy is Yu's shadow? Because people who are subscribed to Game Theory, like, they've got almost 10 million subscribers. Probably only, like, what, 5%-ish of them know much of anything about Persona. So I'm just going to watch the video, we're going to go through it, and I'm going to point out what's wrong and what's kind of, like, funky to me.
A new franchise. Well, at least a new franchise for Game Theory. It's actually a really old franchise. An old franchise with self-contradictory lore, and a very dedicated and very protective fan base.
Okay, stop. Already, you this is a problem. Do not start a video being like, wow guys, this fan base sucks in the first 15 seconds, because that's not a good way to... Like, even if it's correct, and it kind of is, it's just not a good idea. Because immediately what that does is it makes people get defensive, right? From the perspective of somebody who has played Persona and is just watching this video, they now think that you're, like, picking on them to some extent. So just from, like, the first 15 seconds, I've already got this feeling of, like, ooh, I'm being, kind of targeted in some way for being just a Persona fan. But I just don't like wrong information. Alright, so let's continue. Already this is off to a not great start.
Base that I have no doubt is sure to hate whatever I say in this episode, regardless of how much research I do, poking holes in the theory as a result of that aforementioned contradictory lore.
Okay, stop. Don't... I don't know why I need to teach him how to do things, but don't make a theory where the first 30 seconds of it is, even if the theory has holes, do not point out the holes in the theory. That is such nonsense. Can you imagine for 1 second if, like, a climate change scientist started his presentation by going, ignore any contradictions and flaws that you find in this presentation? He would get ridiculed to hell and back. And he said something a second ago about contradictory lore, and I agree. The rules of kind of like, especially when it comes to shadows and stuff, do tend to fluctuate from game to game, but there is an overall kind of consistency to it. But that shouldn't be a problem when you're just analyzing one game. That would be a different situation if we're talking in the entire context of the whole series. Like, from my perspective of somebody who's a Persona fan, you already are, like, afraid of me? And also you don't want anybody to criticize anything you say. And you're gonna deflect it with, like, oh, the series has contradictory lore. So let's continue.
Also a franchise with enemies that look like this, or this.
Oh, that's hilarious. Mara and Hitler? Oh, gosh. I haven't been hearing those same jokes for 5 or 6 years. But I'll let that slide.
Unleash their powers by doing this. Just know that the YouTube monetization bots are going to be all over this episode. So the bots are going to hate it, the fans are going to hate it, and the people who don't know the series probably didn't click on this thing in the first place.
I received an excellent comment from a mutual of mine on Twitter saying, if MatPat knows that the YouTube bots are not going to like it, that the fans are not going to like it, and the people that are subscribed to you, like your subscriber base, aren't going to like it, then why upload it? That to me makes it seem like there was something in the pit of your stomach that made you second guess uploading this, but you did it anyways. And that's never a good idea. Like, I'm no bastion of absolute perfect quality, but if I'm working on a video and the entire time I'm working on it, I just think, man, I do not like the way this is turning out. I don't think this is going to be a good fit for my audience. I stop making it. So this is a rough opening, dude. This isn't even a minute in, and I see nothing but, like, negativity towards the fan base and kind of the series to some extent, and also just like the grand schema of YouTube and viewership and subscribers. But we'll continue.
Leads to perhaps the biggest question about today's episode. Not so much what happened to use Shadow in Persona 4, but why the f did I choose to do this episode?
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that whole... Because that starts the video off with a feeling of I didn't even want to make it. And nobody wants to watch a video that starts with, this shouldn't have been created. Unless it's, like, funny bad. And that's obviously not what MatPat goes for. So we'll continue. I gotta stop saying so we'll continue. I'm gonna lower it for a second just to say, I haven't watched an episode of Game Theory in years. The last one I, like, watched... And this is the video that made me unsubscribe from Game Theory, was the "Are video games offensive to gay people" one. Yeah, he's talking. So, with Cloud dressed up in a pink dress, and that's when I realized that MatPat has no, like, integrity and self-awareness. And that just rubbed me the wrong way. And ever since, he's just felt so corporate and so, like, let's follow market trends and let's capitalize on what's hot. And I find it interesting he would do something about Persona 4 when it would make more money sense to do something about Persona 5. I'm not sure what the logic was with that necessarily. Like, you could have done something like, Persona 5 was Goro the good guy all along, but instead it's about Teddy, which is a little bit odd, but whatever.
Glutton for punishment. And the flagellation stick I'm beating myself with today is none other than Persona.
Stop doing that. Stop doing that.
Franchise. A franchise that's one of the longest running in gaming history, but also one that's been coasting under most players' radars for that same amount of time. Or at least it was until the critical acclaim for Persona 5 last year, which put a big ol' spotlight on this mainstay of the JRPG scene. Getting
Persona 5 from Atlas
mentioned in the same breath as normie-approved giants of gaming like
Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Mario Odyssey.
Did MatPat just call other people normies? But anyways, I have no problem with this stretch of it so far, like the history. This is all pretty much correct. But we'll go on.
and he gets his persona without ever having to fight a stupid-looking boss. Throughout the entirety of the game, we never actually meet Yu's shadow. And that sent my theorist sense of tingling. It's just such an odd pattern to break. Everyone else needs to meet...
Stop, okay. So far this has been fine. The introductory, the talking about the game itself, this is all okay. It's up to here, this is where it gets funky. So, this is one of those things where, within specifically the context of Persona 4, that's fine. Yeah, Yu Narukami is the odd man out. But the problem is that the protagonist has been the odd man out since Persona 3. In 3, 4, and 5, he's the weird guy who doesn't have to face his shadow. And it is possible to have a persona without facing your shadow, it's just a weird circumstance. Like, I'm hoping he talks about this kind of stuff later on in the video. I hope to God he brings up fucking Izanami, because if not, that's a problem. But characters like Adachi never face their shadow, and they just have the persona innately. Like, Adachi did this weird shit where he kind of turned into his shadow, and then he got taken over by Amino Sagiri. But he has Magatsu Izanagi without the need of facing the shadow. All the anti-shadow weapons, like Aegis and Labras, they don't need to fight a shadow. They're just kind of innately built in with the persona, I guess you could say. I think it develops over time, but that's a whole big different discussion.
Shadow in order to gain a persona, but you, the main character of the game, completely neglects this part of the process. But he must have a shadow somewhere, right? That is the whole point of this game. Coming to terms with the parts of you that you don't want to acknowledge. So then where is it? Where is Yu's shadow? Well, I'm here today to say that it's been staring us in the face the entire game. That's right. What I'm proposing is that Teddy, sweet, lovable, cuddly, Humpty Dumpty-esque Teddy, is secretly Yu's former shadow. Now, that at first might seem like...
Okay, stop. That doesn't make sense. What do you mean a former shadow? There's no such thing as a former shadow. A shadow is always something that exists. You just tame it and you learn how to control it. And then it turns into the persona. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, extraneous lore does make a difference. If you're looking at this from just Persona 4, it's fine, but it's still not correct. Like, I can sit there and say, in the context of the Frieza saga, the Super Saiyan is a legendary warrior full of rage, but with a pure heart. That has not mattered in a very long time. Like, in Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, the whole big, like, scheme of it is that the malevolent entity the Hino Kagetsuchi wants to re-shadowify everybody's personas and turn them into super powerful death machines. So that is a thing you can do. You can lose your sense of, like, ego and pride, I guess, to some extent. Like, your acceptance of yourself, and the shadow will come back. But that's not, like, a huge problem. Let's continue.
Trying to put together pieces that don't really belong to try and retrofit an answer. We have one character who, for no apparent reason, is missing a shadow, and we have another character who was a former shadow and has himself a mysterious backstory that he just so happens to not remember. Add the two together, stir well, and boom, you got yourself a theory.
I disagree. I think that MatPat has this problem where he looks for outliers in things and decides that there has to be something wrong with it. Like, I don't mind that as much. I have a bigger problem with when there's a lore and in-game explanation for why something the way it is, but because you still think it's weird, then there needs to be a theory about it. It is very well explained how Narukami is shadowless, and how he gets a persona, and it is also more or less explained what Teddy is. Teddy is just a shadow. There is really nothing special or amazing about him. He's just kind of like a genetic freak that happened to gain self-awareness. And in the grand context of Persona, that's really not even the world's biggest, like, anomaly. In Persona 3, for example, Metis is a shadow with, like, a conscience and a persona who is revealed to have been Aigis' shadow all along. So shadows with personas aren't the weirdest thing ever. Anyways, moving on.
That's not the way it's gonna work here. I mean, sure, it's definitely suspicious, and it's initially what got me looking in this direction, but the connections between Teddy and Yu are written into the very fabric of the gameplay. Let's look at the facts. In Persona 4's True End, the final climactic battle begins with Yu hearing the voices of people he's closest to. To use the in-game text directly, the hearts of those you form the deepest bonds with become your strength. These words of encouragement come from everyone that Yu's maxed out a social link with. The characters that you as the player have spent the most time with come to lend Yu their strength in his moment of greatest need. It is a beautiful sequence with even minor characters like the Shrine Fox coming in to lend their support if you spend enough time with them. I get all emotional just watching it. But the thing is, you can totally play this game like an antisocial a-hole. You can still get to the ending of the game without spending time with anyone at school or your family at home. In this scenario, no one will come to support you in that final battle because you failed to max out all their social links. Well, no one except for one person. Bear, egg, thing. You guessed it, it's Teddy. Yes! Even if you intentionally play the game like a jerk, becoming the king of turds to rule over all Turdville, Teddy's social link will always be maxed out by the end of the game. You, as you, can reject everyone except for Teddy. It is impossible to become the world's savior without Teddy's support. The game literally won't allow it to happen. There is no separating the two. As Tom Cruise said,
"You complete me."
Almost like a shadow and its owner. But that's not all. One part.
Alright, well, first of all, that's nonsense. Teddy's social link is an automatic link, just because, first of all, who would want to hang out with Teddy? And also, it's woven into the story. The whole reason why Teddy's social link is automatic is because he's the most, I don't want to say the most plot important, but he's the one that's just how he is. He's just integrated into the story, so that whenever something important happens, or whenever you have a moment to spend with just Teddy, it will complete the link, like, on its own. Like, that's the whole point of Teddy's character, is that he goes from, who am I, and then after Nanako doesn't die, and he thinks that she dies, and it turns out that she didn't. when you're in the Velvet Room, which is something we're going to talk about in a second, then his character arc is complete. He realizes that he has friends and people that care about him, and that he didn't let down Nanako, and then his persona evolves. And yeah, he does show up in the end regardless, but that's only because it would have been the most awkward scene ever if Narukami just lays there on the ground, nobody comes to visit him, and then he gets up and uses his bonds to destroy Izanami. But we'll continue on.
But that's not all. One part of the game that often goes overlooked is the Velvet Room, a place that exists between consciousness and subconsciousness, where you meets the creepy-looking Igor and his assistant Elizabeth.
Okay, so this has been memed to death, the whole he calls Margaret Elizabeth thing. I don't really have much to say about that. I don't know why you didn't, why wouldn't you proofread it and think that's not Elizabeth? I have a couple of theories. One is either that I know MatPat has writers and editors and shit. It's not a one-man show. So some writer sat there and wrote this and made a mistake, and you read it wrong. And, that's fine, but I guess double check yourself. Or he possibly just doesn't know. Whoever wrote this didn't play it, and it was just who's in charge of the Velvet Room? Is it Elizabeth? Yeah, it's Elizabeth. Or it was just a slip of the tongue. I do that a lot. But, either way, it's not a big deal. I wouldn't grill the guy too bad about that. I have less of a problem with saying a name wrong than having, other shit that's factually not correct. So that's just, an oversight, I guess.
And get long-winded lectures about the game's themes. During our first visit to this shagadelic ride, we learned that it's a place that's only accessible to those who've received a special invitation. Quote from the game,
"Only those who are bound by a contract may enter."
And in Persona 4, the only people able to enter this room throughout the entirety of the game are you, Igor, and Igor's assistant. We never once see anyone else enter the Velvet Room.
This is another one of those things where in the context of just Persona 4, you're correct. But in other stuff like the Golden, Marie just hangs out in there, even though she really has no business being in there at all. And, again, when it comes to the grand scheme of Persona, there's many instances of weird shit happening, like people going into the Velvet Room when they can't. In Persona 1 and 2, it's just a free-for-all. You can just go in there. You and your entire party. In 3, as far as I remember, it's protagonist only. Aigis is able to go in there after she gets the wild card. And then in Persona 4, obviously, I just said Marie, and then Teddy gets in. And in Persona 5, the thing that's interesting about the room in Persona 5 is that it really does turn the concept of who can get in here on its head. This is huge Persona 5 spoilers, by the way, so just skip ahead a bit if you don't want to hear this. But in Persona 5, it's revealed that a entity known as Yaldabaoth, forced his way into the Velvet Room and caused a lot of problems. So it's not this impossible to get through space. You can get in there if you force your way through. But, the rules of it are kinda up in the air. Like you said earlier, there is inconsistent lore about this shit. But when you're making a theory about something, you gotta look from the whole scheme of it to see if there's something wrong with what you're saying. And yeah, Teddy getting in here is kind of an odd thing. I bring that up in my fifth theory, Teddy's Lucifer. The idea that, why can Teddy even get in here? And even in the game, Igor's yeah, that's kind of weird.
One, at least, except for Teddy. He seems to just stumble into it, almost as if completely by accident. And there, he and you just sit around and have a conversation. Now, remember, Teddy is a being who started off as a shadow, and seems to have no real history before humans entered the TV realm. He has no connections to Igor and his contract, so it makes absolutely zero sense that he'd be able to enter the Velvet Room when no one else can. That is, unless you consider that there's something more to his identity. Remember, shadows are a part of the original person, the parts of themselves that they don't want to confront. If Teddy is you's shadow, that means that Teddy literally is you, or at least a part of you. Therefore, he too would be bound by the same contract that you's under, and thus able to get...
I like this little text scroll. People were sending me images of, because of the whole Teddy's Lucifer thing, hell itself, literally the devil. So that's just kind of funny. But I still don't see, maybe he'll get to it, but I still do not see the evidence for the idea that he is his shadow. So far, you've just presented me Teddy is an odd case, and also gameplay thing that is intentionally designed with Teddy's character in mind, and so that Narukami will not be completely by himself at the very end if you play the game wrong.
To get inside the Velvet Room. And if that wasn't enough, what's even more interesting is that this happens at a point in the game when Teddy is beginning to question the very nature of his own identity. Coincidence? I think not.
No, I do. I literally do think coincidence. Like, I think Teddy the entire time knew kinda deep down inside that he was a shadow. Like, Morgana from Persona 5 has a kinda similar character arc of, I am this weird thing and I don't know what I am. The difference is Morgana was hell-bent on the idea that he was human. Whereas Teddy really didn't know, and he wanted to be a human. So I think that's more a moment of him just accepting what he is, rather than realizing some grand thing about, like, his relationship to the protagonist.
First thing that Teddy says to you upon entering the Velvet Room is,
I've been thinking all this time who I really am.
oh really? Maybe the answer is staring you quite literally in the face. Now, just to address a counter-argument that's probably already coming, other people enter the Velvet Room in other Persona games. Minato in 3, and pretty much everyone in 2 as just...
He brought it up. Okay. Half disregard my previous point then. Let's see where he's going with this.
The Velvet Room that we see in Persona 4 is unique. It looks like the interior of a limousine, making it physically distinct from the booth-like appearance of the Velvet Room from earlier Persona games. When Igor meets you for the first time and refers to this place being off-limits to anyone who hasn't entered...
Okay, no, stop immediately. This is, you were going in the right direction, but then you fucked it, because you don't know what the Velvet Room is. The Velvet Room is a place that exists in... this thing goes by many names, but basically the other world, kind of where the shadows come from. Like, the other world has a lot of different, areas in it, like the TV world, like, Mementos is a part of that. Just the other side, where the personas and the shadows and the magical shit happens. And, like, in Persona 5, the Velvet Room is physically located in the depths of Mementos. Now, like Igor says, in virtually every game, the Velvet Room is a place that is shaped by the mind of the guest that is attending it. This is a, more relevant theme in, 3, 4, and 5. In 1 and 2, I don't think they necessarily stick to, a theme. The Velvet Room in 1 is kind of just a room, and then in 2, it kind of has this piano bar kind of feel, sort of. But it's shaped by the mind and the perception of the protagonist. And it reflects their journey and the struggles they're going through. In 3, it's an elevator because it represents Tartarus and going up and the fool's journey. In 4, it's the limousine because they're going through the TV world and it gives off that Hollywood kind of vibe of luxury and of grandeur to some extent. And even at the end of Persona 4, I believe this is in the true ending. It might actually be after you beat Amino Sagiri, but Igor says we have arrived at our destination, which means that it was going somewhere. The Velvet Room moves. It's not a stationary location. In 5 and 1 and 2, it kind of stays in the same place. Actually, no, it doesn't, because, you can get into it from different entrances in different locations. It's not the same room if you can go into it from Polonia Mall, and then also get into it from an alley in Inaba. It's a mythical bullshit location, and it changes. It's not the same room, and there's not 5 different unique rooms. It's the same magical space that shapes to the perception of whoever the protagonist is. So that's just not correct.
Contract with him, he's referring to that specific place, that specific Velvet Room with the limousine appearance. Notice how none of the other Velvet Rooms have that sort of contractual stipulation. So the rules of one room in a past game shouldn't necessarily apply to the way that Persona 4's room chooses to operate.
No, that's silly. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, okay, here we go. He's about to make a straw man. Never mind.
Argument number 2. Teddy isn't Yu's shadow because Yu doesn't have a shadow. Yu is special. He's the chosen one. And I could totally see why you might think that. Over the course of the game, we learn that not just anyone can enter the TV world. As we find out, the only way that people can enter the Midnight Channel is by going with someone who's been granted this special gift from the gods. Yu just so happens...
That's half correct. The only stipulation... This is kind of weird, because as far as we're aware, you can only get in there if you have a persona. But that doesn't stop somebody from getting thrown in, so to speak. Like, what happens with Adachi is Adachi just throws those people in there. And Namatame does the same thing. So you don't need a persona to get in, really. You just need to be, like, allowed in. That's kind of what he's saying, but he's just phrased it sort of weird.
So maybe the fact that Yu has the god's blessing explains why all his friends encounter their shadow in the TV world while he never has to. It's an explanation that would make sense if we didn't have evidence directly to the contrary.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
It's revealed that only 3 people have received the TV gift. Yu is one. The other 2 are Namatame and Adachi.
Alright, this is correct.
Responsible for throwing innocent victims into the TV world. And it's here that the explanation of Yu is special doesn't hold up, because both Namatame and Adachi have the gift, but both still have shadows who appear in the TV land. Namatame and Adachi both merge with their shadows when you fight them as bosses. Yu is one of a kind. He's a paradox.
I mean, just by saying this, you've already kind of contradicted yourself. This idea that Narukami is special, and therefore Teddy has to be his shadow. Just by saying that these other 2 are also weird. Like, you can't sit there and say these 3 are outliers, like, from the same lore reason, and then also say, but this guy is a mega outlier because I want him to be. Like, the reason why Adachi and Namatame even had a shadow to begin with was because they were so full of self-doubt about themselves and who they were as people. So Adachi has a persona. His persona is Magatsu Izanagi. Namatame, we don't know. He never used it. He probably has no idea how to. But he likely has one or has the potential to awaken one. Like, the thing that's, like, not right about this is again looking from the grand context of the whole series, is that in both the animation and in Arena, Narukami does have a shadow. So that on its own just immediately makes it so that Teddy being his shadow does not make a lick of sense. People don't have 2 shadows. That doesn't happen. A shadow can have a persona and a shadow. But one soul, one conscious entity cannot generate 2 different shadows. It doesn't work that way.
He has a persona but no shadow, and he's literally the only one who's like this. The unusual connection between Yu and Teddy even makes sense when you view it through the lens of the game's themes. One of the things that the Persona games love to do is play with the idea of tarot cards. Each relationship that's expressed in the game as a social link is represented as one of the major arcana.
I wish you wouldn't use these low quality, like, straight from the Megami Tensei renders, because these really don't look great.
Tarot cards. Someone call in Miss Cleo because they're a big deal in this series. What? I don't even know what that was, like Italian mixed with fail. Call in Miss Cleo because tarot cards are a big deal in this series, and one of the things that makes the Persona games really special is the incredible attention to detail in the way that the game matches different characters and social links to arcana that parallel their attributes. Yu's arcana at the top of the game is the Fool, which represents innocence, divine inspiration, madness, freedom, spontaneity, inexperience, chaos, and creativity. In nearly every regard, he's the embodiment of a blank slate. Now, if the player reaches the true end, Yu's persona ascends to the World Arcana, a representation of totality, a symbol of fulfillment, wholeness, harmony. This lines up with what's happening in the story when Yu's persona ascends. He's literally becoming the savior of the world. Now look at Teddy's arcana, the Star, which is associated with hope, self-confidence, faith, altruism, luck, generosity, peace, and joy. These match exactly with what we know about Teddy. He's all about cheering people on, getting along with others. But in addition to matching Teddy's personalities, these are the exact traits that Yu has to adopt for himself in his evolution from spontaneous and experienced fool to hero of the world. He needs to take the world's burdens upon himself. That, in many ways, is the ultimate in altruism and generosity. He also needs to become a symbol of hope as the world places their faith in him. Again, all features that Teddy already has and that Yu wouldn't have, but his shadow, his unacknowledged half, probably would. So
Okay, well, this is very silly. Wait, I'll let him continue, actually.
I think here's how it worked. When Yu was selected...
Alright, never mind. He's just gonna finish it. So, this is really dumb because he's basically taking the idea of the Fool's Journey, which is a consistent theme throughout pretty much the whole series, and saying, because elements from one arcana match up with the personality traits of Narukami, then Teddy has to be his other half, which is really silly. That would be like if I said Ren from Persona 5, like, Goro is his shadow because he, like, believes in justice and in fairness and in punishing the wicked. Like, it's just a silly connection to make. Like, you can sit there and cherry pick any detail about any arcana and say, yeah, this applies to the protagonist. So that's a really silly bit of evidence. Like, that's an extremely loose bit of proof. Like, I could also just as easily say, oh, in Persona 3, Toriyumi is your shadow, because she represents the hermit, and the protagonist has to learn how to break out of his shell, and not be, like, such a social recluse, and, like, make friends and learn the value of getting yourself out there. So that's just really silly.
Gods to receive his gift and the special persona, it left his true shadow, Teddy, with no home and no purpose. He'd been kicked to the curb.
What does that mean? He's left with no home. That really baffles me, because I don't understand what the hell he's trying to say. He makes it seem like... So, he doesn't want to talk about Izanami. He keeps saying the gods, which isn't technically wrong, it's just kind of odd. Narukami is given, like, we'll just call it the potential, like, the wild card from Izanami. And Izanagi kind of comes in that package. And I guess MatPat thinks that means that the shadow within him that theoretically could have existed just gets kicked out of that plane of reality and ends up in the TV. Which is really silly, because the way Teddy describes it, it makes it seem as though he's been in the TV world for a pretty substantial amount of time, just wandering around. And the events that take place in between him getting the handshake and him actually meeting Teddy is like, it's a couple of days. So that's just really weird to say.
Teddy free to develop into his own furry Kinder Egg. It's how a confirmed former shadow with no memory of his owner and a lingering identity crisis is able to do the things shadows would never be able to do that we see Teddy do in this game.
Okay, so that's another just completely wrong thing. Within the context of, like, Persona 4, yeah, sure, I guess, but just Persona 4. But like I said, there's weird shadows. Like, Metis is... Nobody in the entire group could tell that Metis was just Aigis' shadow. Because for all intents and purposes, she was just, like, a humanoid anti-shadow weapon. The same as Aigis. And nobody could tell the difference. Like, Teddy is a weird case, because he can just make a human body. Like, that's fucking weird. His stomach is apparently just a void of nothingness. He can, like... make those glasses just out of nothing. So Teddy's just a weird character.
Into the real world and gain his own persona. Get into the velvet room without a contract. Not only does theorizing that Teddy is Yu's shadow answer two of the game's biggest unsolved mysteries, it also...
Wait, stop. I'm confused. What were the two mysteries? The first mystery, I presume, is why does Yu not have a shadow? And then I guess, what is Teddy? I mean, both of those are completely answered. Yu does not have a shadow because Izanami gave him basically a skip a turn button where he doesn't have to go through the process of dealing with the shadow and facing his own inner struggles. Like, Adachi is the same way. Adachi can use a persona and he's completely racked with, like, self-doubt and anger and frustration and has no friends. And as for Teddy, he's just a shadow. That's all he is. He's like he's like an X-Men shadow that just began to exist and formed a conscience. So there's no mystery to be found there. We know what, like, the explanations for both of those things.
Arcana themes and overall game mechanics. As the true ending shows,
Wait, game mechanics? I don't remember this being brought up. I guess he's talking about the thing with, like, at the end where he shows up. But that kind of defeats your own argument if you're just going to say, oh, it's just a game mechanic, that he appears because nobody else would be there and it would be really awkward otherwise. Like, the characters that have an automatically progressing social link or confidant do that because they're important to the story. Goro is that way, like, the group social links are that way, Teddy is that way. It's not because there was some secret undercover relationship between them that they wanted you to figure out. It's pretty well explained, like, in-universe and out-of-universe, why that's happening. And another thing is just that Teddy just wants to be your friend.
Share an unbreakable link, an unbreakable social link. And considering that Persona 4 is a game all about forming bonds with other people, but most importantly, forming bonds with yourself, I can't think of a better way to demonstrate exactly that. Well...
So later games would disagree with you, because Teddy doesn't have his evolved Persona Kamui. He's just back to Kintoki Doji, which is really strange. I don't know why that is. But yeah, in Arena, he just has Kintoki Doji again. and it's never explained why.
Breakable social link, and considering that Persona 4 is a game all about forming bonds with other people, but most importantly forming bonds with yourself, I can't think of a better way to demonstrate exactly that. Well, outside of making it a bit more obvious so it doesn't take a theory 10 years after the fact to expose the truth.
No, stop doing that. This is something that I don't like and a lot of people don't like about MatPat, is the egomania combined with don't pick on me type of shit. No, you are not some super genius for piecing together extremely loose pieces of information that don't have anything to do with anything and deciding, look guys, I just solved this huge conundrum, this secret. It's more likely that it took 10 years for somebody to figure it out because it doesn't make sense and because it's wrong. So, like, how dare you say, game, don't you have things that are left up in the open? Like, that's really strange to me. Why would you complain about things being able to be theorized? That'd be like if a plumber complained that people's toilets were breaking too much.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
So this is something about MatPat that I've always disliked, is it's just a theory. Because he can use that line to deflect any and all criticism. Like, I'm sure in the comments of this I will get, why are you so butthurt? It's just a theory. And that's really stupid because, like I said earlier, if any real scientist or anybody proposing any sort of theory were to sit there and complain and say, but it's just a theory, you guys, stop poking holes in it, they would be a laughingstock. But on YouTube, apparently you can just get away with that. Another thing people will do that I hate, like CinemaSins does this a lot, is they'll say, it's just satire, bro. Like, stop pointing out the ridiculous nonsense, like the flaws in the video that you're pointing out. Because it's just satire. Nothing is above any sort of criticism. So, like, don't sit there and go, here's a theory, here's all the evidence I have, and then at the end basically say, well, I just solved this, haha. And then go, but it's still just a theory. Like, you can't be both. You can't be two-faced and be like, yeah, I'm correct, I'm so smart, and then also be like, but I need a shield to prevent, like, criticism. So I think that's basically the end of it. This is just like, yeah, crap. But whew, alright, so that was a doozy of a video. Like, I'd imagine if I was some guy who has never heard of Persona, which is probably where all these likes come from, I would be like, yep, case closed, he's his shadow. Because he on purpose leaves out, like, lore that's expanded upon in future Persona 4 stuff. Like, not even stuff from Persona 5 or Persona 3 or whatever. Just things that are added onto the lore in Persona 4. It'd be like if I said, well, in the context of just Kingdom Hearts 1. Like, it really doesn't work that way. So, like, in the context of all of MatPat's videos, I don't think this is one of the worst ones. But it's still kind of egregious in a way, because the first minute or so of it is just like, grr, you Persona fans, grr. And, like, the brilliance of it is that he's created a self-fulfilling prophecy and, like a barrier. Where anybody who tries to point out something that's wrong with it is immediately, like, I'm gonna see it in the comments, is immediately tackled with this, see, MatPat was right. You Persona fans, you can't handle da-da-da. But it's that combined with, like, neglecting information and just not doing enough research into shit and trying to deflect wrong research and information. Like, that irritates me. Like, what I get from this video, the theory, according to him in my mind, is that you, or the other way around, Teddy is Yu's shadow because magic from the gods kicked Teddy out of Yu, and that Teddy, because he's the star and the star happens to share traits with Narukami, there's a connection. And because he shows up in the end, there's, like, they have to have some unbreakable secret bond. And also, Igor just owns a limousine and a elevator and a prison. And Elizabeth is Margaret. Or the other way around, Margaret is Elizabeth. And also some shit about how Persona 4 is stupid because it didn't make something that doesn't make any sense blatantly obvious. But yeah, I just think it's really backwards video. It's got a lot of misinformation. It's got a lot of, like, unnecessary, both MatPat defending himself from people, like he puts up this shield and then calls people, like, petty man-children. while hiding behind the same shield of you can't criticize it because da-da-da, Persona lore is inconsistent and whatever. But that's just a theory of Fifth Theory. But yeah, go watch Fifth Theory Teddy as Lucifer. It's a video entirely designed to not make sense and to be a joke, and it has more factual information backing it up than this video.